Welcome back. If you want an easy summary on where the Washington talks on infrastructure stand, try this. President Biden and Republicans can't agree on how much to spend, on where the money should come from, or even what is and isn't infrastructure. But other than that, things look great. Perhaps more significant, though, the recent spate of cyber attacks calls into question the safety of our energy grid, including oil pipelines, as we saw with the Colonial Pipeline attack. So joining me now is someone that does have a lot on her plate these days with both of those topics. It's Energy Secretary Jennifer Granholm. Secretary Granholm, welcome back to Meet the Press.
Thanks so much, Chuck.
Hey, I want to talk about what your response at the Energy Department has been since the Colonial Pipeline attack. I think about what happens if the Plantation Run pipeline goes down. You have Enbridge, which controls a pipeline that comes from Canada, provides the middle of the country gas. If one of those pipelines went down in this summer, are we better prepared to handle the crisis than we were just a month ago, or do we have a ways to go?
Well, here's what I would say is that the TSA actually just put out a series of regulations requiring pipelines to let us know if they have been the victim and whenever, in the real time. This is just like what Chris Matthews was just saying. Where are these attacks happening so that we know and we can coordinate with our intelligence community to determine not just how to respond in the long term, but how to respond immediately. So to that extent, yes, the president has issued this executive order that really focuses on what the federal government should be doing. But as you've noted, these are a lot of private sector entities that run the grid, that run the pipelines. And so one of the reasons why the American Jobs Plan is so important, and so curious, Chuck, why the investment that the president proposed in transmission grids, which would not just increase capacity and increase resilience, but also address cyber, why that isn't a part of what the Republicans' counterproposal was. And hopefully it will be, but it's a bit frustrating that it hasn't been.
What kind of authority do you have right now that, so you oversee the safety of our nuclear power plants. There's a certain level, and those are in some cases run by private companies. There's a certain level of security they have to meet that meets federal regulation. Is there anything, can you demand certain standards of Colonial and these other pipeline companies, or do you not have that authority at the Energy Department?
Right now, on pipelines, no. I mean, we have an agreement with the private sector on the transmission grid. There are basic standards, cyber standards that they adhere to, cyber standards that are developed by the Department of Commerce. And we need that same sort of regime with pipelines, and that does not exist at the moment. This notion of requiring them to report is important. That's a first step, but we need to take the next step. We need to work together, and it's not just cyber on grid and pipeline. It's cyber for across the country. It is a huge issue, and everyone needs to wake up and up their game in terms of protecting themselves, but also in terms of telling the federal government if they are a target of attacks. Many of these private companies are, don't want to let people know. They can't pay, they should not be paying ransomware, but they should be letting us know so we can protect the rest of the country.
So do you think there should be a law in the books that bans the payment of ransom? I mean, you may have to actually outlaw the ransom payments. Are you ready to go there?
Yeah, well, I mean, I would. I will say that, but I don't know that. I don't know whether Congress or the president is at that point. But I do think that we need to send this strong message that paying of ransomware only exacerbates and accelerates this problem. You are encouraging the bad actors when that happens. And I will say, the president, to the conversation that you were just having, the president is really focused on the international regime of this as well, working with our allies. Every country, no country wants to be the victim of major cyber attacks, of any cyber attacks. So international, private sector, inside the federal government, all of us have to be, the president is working on a 360-degree solution.
You've been tapped to spend
a solution. There's not just one solution. I'll say
you've been tapped to help build support for the president's infrastructure proposal. That took you to West Virginia this week, and when you hear the words West Virginia and Washington, it means Joe Manchin. When we hear Joe Manchin say he still thinks there's going to be bipartisan support, do you think his definition of bipartisanship is 10 Republican senators, or do you think it's Susan Collins and Lisa Murkowski?
No, I think he really believes there are votes for infrastructure from at least 10 Republicans. And he's got some data on this, which is, I mean, just in my world, in the world of energy, in 2020, in December, there was overwhelming bipartisan support for pieces of energy infrastructure that the president put into the American Jobs Plan, but that has not been part of the Republican counterproposal. For example, investment in the transmission grid or investment in nuclear energy, which Republicans have long supported and are not in the counterproposal, but was in the president's bill. Capping of oil and gas wells and coal mines, which could put a lot of people to work. Republicans have supported that. The president put it in his bill. They didn't come back with a counter that included that. It's just curious. Or, Chuck, the big thing, I mean, just coming from West Virginia, it's a fossil fuel state. The week before, I was in Texas, another fossil fuel state. Republicans and Democrats have asked for the technology and the pipelines to take carbon pollution out of fossil fuel production and put it in the ground. It's called carbon capture.
Right.
The president put it in his plan. Republicans have been clamoring for it. It wasn't in their counterproposal. It's just curious. So the bottom line is he's got reason, he, meaning Joe Manchin, has reason to believe that there's bipartisan support. We just need to see it in the counterproposal.
You brought up climate, and I'm curious, when it comes to getting the oil and gas industry to participate in helping to mitigate climate change, we've seen the Netherlands essentially use a court order to force Shell to do things. We've seen shareholders get some board seats on Exxon and Chevron. What do you believe is the most effective way to engage industry? You were a state attorney general. Would you have filed a lawsuit in the state of Michigan against an oil company, or would you be pursuing the shareholder strategy?
Well, or I think that, honestly, these companies are seeing where the globe is going. They are seeing that their biggest customers are demanding that they produce energy in a cleaner way. And so they want to see things like this solution of adding technology to remove CO2 from their production as part of the solution. So to me, the carrots that the president has put into his plan are really carrots that the private sector is asking for. Even the fossil fuel companies, I won't say all of them clearly, but a lot of them, the big oil companies have all, not all, but many of them have the same goals of getting to net zero carbon emissions by 2050. They're not going to be able to do it without the technology that will allow them to remove CO2 from their production. Right. But again, the president put it in his plan, and I think that's a way to go.
Optimism that the capital markets will force the oil and gas industry to change. We shall see. Anyway, Energy Secretary Jennifer Granholm, thanks for coming on and sharing your perspective with us. I appreciate it. Hey, thanks for watching our YouTube channel. Follow today's top stories and breaking news by downloading the NBC News app.